Hi there, and welcome to this episode of Historical Niagara, where we are going to be talking about waterfalls. To give you a hint, not Niagara Falls. Guess what? We are going to the small town of Falls, which has one of Canada's oldest towns. In fact, it's now considered a ghost town, and there's two waterfalls there, but we're going to another waterfalls after Falls, which is called Decew Falls, the famous landing place where Laura Secord made her famous trek from Queenston Heights to warn the British that the Americans were coming. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. God, I love Niagara.
I have a question for you. What do you know about Niagara?
It has a really big falls.
I have a question for you. Do you like history?
So let me ask you, is that a rhetorical question?
Niagara, it's more than just the falls. It's rich in history and wine.
Okay, so we were talking about the more obscure places in Niagara. Some of the coolest history is not even in Niagara Falls.
Historical Niagara rocks!
What else do you have to say for yourself?
Good morning, I'm Donald, and I'm all about history.
And I'm all about the base. The base. If you're born, raised, or visit Niagara, you're always from Niagara. One of the greatest places on Earth. Welcome to Falls, one of Niagara's best kept secrets.
Welcome to the Center for Conservation here at Falls Conservation Area. The building was completed in 2008. It's been open for just over 11 years here at Falls Conservation Area. It's a building that we're very proud of. It was built as a leader in environmental efficiency and design, and at the time it received a gold award, or gold standard award. So we're very proud of this building because it reutilizes or reuses elements of our environment in order to be sustainable. So for example, all of our water is harvested off of our slanted roofs. The building was intentionally designed with quite a bit of glass. The way that it is built and designed and shaped is able to harness as much sunlight as possible 365 days a year. We also utilize geothermal energy to heat the building, which is fantastic. In fact, the floors are heated, which makes this building special. We utilize this building for a number of different reasons. We utilize it for corporate bookings and meetings and events, but we also utilize it as a center for our education program delivery. So we host a number of schools of thousands of students every single year, and many of them pass by for education programming here at the Center for Conservation. There are two waterfalls, not one but two, in the 20 Mile Creek here on the conservation area property. Our most famous fall, which we call Niagara's Other Falls, is what we call the Lower Waterfall. The Lower Waterfall is an 88-foot drop, which is quite significant, and it forms this beautiful bowl, this beautiful punch bowl shape. And students come and folks come from afar to see those fantastic layers of sedimentary rock. It's a great teaching tool, but it's also very picturesque. So Lower Falls is really important for early settlement history. The Ball brothers utilized the site as the water power that provided the power for their sawmill and the gristmill. So they dammed off part of the 20 Mile Creek there and were able to utilize that water power to power those two mills. And our second waterfall here at Falls we refer to as the Upper Falls. It's a 23-foot drop located just up our Cataract Trail from the Lower Falls. The Upper Waterfall was the source of water power for the woolen mill, which operated for several decades, run by the Ball family. Now, the Upper Waterfall is really interesting as well because it's also the output of an underground river which runs parallel with the 20 Mile Creek for several kilometers. So it's a really fantastic site where we see the fusion of groundwater and surface water coming together, and it's a great site for us to teach those concepts to students when they visit us here at Falls Conservation Area. So this site, which we know as Falls Conservation Area, was settled in the early 1800s by the brothers George and John Ball, in 1807 to be exact. And the brothers were United Empire Loyalists, which had originally settled in Albany, New York, but of course during the Revolution, fighting for England, they ended up being relocated to Upper Canada and decided to settle here on this site. And they purchased over 1,200 acres of property to host their settlement. At the time, they were trying to initiate a settlement called Glen Elgin and had the site surveyed for such. But we know that this site was home to people and utilized by people for thousands of years before early settlers ever came here. The Ball brothers settled this site and they ended up building 3 different mills, a gristmill, a sawmill, and a woolen mill. The gristmill remains standing today and we're very proud of it. It's one of the only 2 operating wooden gristmills in Ontario. It operates for 4 days a year over our Thanksgiving festival, which happens every year over the holiday weekends. And this was the 45th year that we hosted the festival. This site is particularly interesting over time. The Ball family utilized the space for their industry. It was a small settlement. They had a blacksmith shop and they had a tanner. They had a lot of things going on. And in the mid 1840s, that was really the height of their production. They were producing more flour than ever. They were very busy, very industrious, and that allowed them to build the Victorian home, which we see standing just off of 6th Avenue today. It's a beautiful Victorian house, dates to 1846. And we're able to tour it and showcase it to folks and people that are visiting for tours of our buildings, as it was redesigned and decorated in the 1920s by Clarence Ball, which is really exciting. We also have a number of interpretive sites here. You see the Conservation Authority took over the property in the late 1960s and have utilized this property as a conservation area since then. Over the last 12 or so years, with the addition of the Centre for Conservation, the site really became a flagship for the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. We use this site for education programming, tours, and visitations. We host weddings here throughout the season. It's a really fantastic space for ecology, for environmental learning, and it's a wonderful place for folks to come and spend a day picnicking, touring and hiking the trails, and exploring the 20-Mile Creek and the Niagara Escarpment. So this conservation area is really important to us at the NPCA. It's one of our flagship sites, and we're extremely proud of all we have to offer here. And it's a fantastic site for folks to come and visit, get connected with nature, and learn a little bit of early settlement history.
This house was built in 1846 for George Peterman Ball. He was the 2nd generation of the Ball family that lived here on the property, but the first one to live in this house. He passed the house on to his son Mortimer Ball, who passed it on to his son Manly Ball. Manly was the last of the family that lived here, and when he passed away in the 1960s is when this house and the property was sold to the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority and opened up as a park and museum as you see it today. Where we are, this is the music room. This is one of the rooms that was originally the general store. As in the 1850s, there was a village called Glen Elgin that was developing here on the property. The village of Glen Elgin was made up of workers of the mills, as well as those related to the trades in the mills, such as a cooper who made barrels and a blacksmith. When there was the need for the general store, this operated to be able to supply the families that lived here with the food and supplies that they would have need. The village died away by the 1870s when the mills became less important to the area, with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, lack of water, and also lack of transportation. The industries moved elsewhere in the area, and this became just a family home. Mortimer Ball did extensive renovations to it, and by 1920s had completed installing electricity, radiant heat, and converting this area into sitting rooms as you see it today. This church was built in 1864 in Hannon, Ontario, which is now located within the city limits of Hamilton. It was an Anglican church and very classic of an early settler Anglican church. It's very simple, yet did have the stained glass windows, which is very traditional in the Anglican churches. This was St. George's Anglican Church, which outgrew this church building, and a new church was constructed on its site. The church building here was decommissioned and vacant for quite a few years until it was purchased and then brought over here to Balls Falls in 1974 by the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. Today it is a decommissioned chapel where it is used for weddings as well as for school programs where students can learn about early settler life. This mill was completed in 1809 by George and John Ball. We call this the gristmill as it ground wheat into flour, as well as corn, rye, and barley, and any other product that the local farmers was producing. In 1842, an addition was put onto the mill, adding 2 additional stones to the grinding process. This made the total of stones 4 stones, which increased production from 1,000 barrels of flour a year to 7,000 barrels of flour a year. The Ball family would have shipped these flour barrels to Great Britain to make a profit. When they put the addition on in 1842, they also installed a steam engine which allowed production to be able to be more continuous, as by the 1840s this river, the 20-mile creek, was becoming unreliable in its water source. When this property was purchased in the 1960s by the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, this mill went under a massive restoration project in order to preserve this mill to be able to be operational as it is today. Today we do operate this mill once a year during our Thanksgiving festival every October, where you can see us grind wheat into flour, as well as be able to purchase this flour and bring it home for cooking for yourself.
We know that there were 2 lime kilns at least on this property here at Balls Falls Conservation Area that would have been utilized in the early 1800s. The lime kilns are really important to what was happening here at the time. You see, limestone was being harvested from along the escarpment. It was being fired over a 24 to 48-hour process. The stone was being burnt and dissolved into a granule form or a powder form. And that powder was mixed with water. It was utilized for mortar, or chinking as it was called, to hold beams together in the construction process. And a perfect example, a prime example of that is seen in our historic cabin, which we call the Fairchild Cabin, on display here at Balls Falls Conservation Area. The lime kilns were utilized consistently by the folks that were working here at Balls Falls Conservation Area in the setting of the Glen Elgin village by the Ball family and their workers, and were really important to the work in the industry that was being done during early settlement in terms of construction and building. And so the kilns are very important to us. We have one here on site that has been reconstructed, which we're very proud of, and hope to showcase and have on display for folks in early 2020. One of the barns we have on the property, we call it the display barn. It's a fantastic example of a barn that would have been utilized for the storage of machinery, for tools, and for the storage and supply of animals and animal feed. It has a hay mow at the top of it, and currently it's being utilized to showcase a number of different artifacts that previously belonged to the Ball family, or are period-accurate pieces that were donated to Balls Falls in the early 1970s. We have on display a really fantastic contraption that was utilized to remove stumps from the fields that were here on site. We have some fantastic examples of looms that would have been utilized in the woolen mill, for example, that showcase the creation of those textiles that were being spun and produced here on site. And the display barn is a really fantastic example of the type of building that would have been constructed. During education programs, we utilize this as an example of construction techniques in the early 1800s. Balls Falls Conservation Area provides an excellent opportunity to learn a little bit about early settlement and heritage as seen here in our historic village. But it's also a really fantastic experience to get out in the great outdoors, to experience the Niagara Escarpment and the fantastically diverse Carolinian forest along our beautiful trails. You see, our trails are interspersed with history over the last 200 years of early settlement. And there's so much to see and do here, so many different species of plants and trees and insects and animals to identify and to learn about. Our guides, our educators, and our leaders here on site are more than willing to share information about the site, about the plants, about the history of early settlement in the Ball family, and how this site was utilized for hundreds of years. We welcome folks from afar to come and experience the fantastic forest, the outdoor space that we have here, our trails, and of course our beautiful heritage village.
So that concludes our visit to Balls Falls. Now we are going to go down the road, south, southeast, whatever that is, to Decew Falls and check it out. The famous place that Laura Seacrum came to warn the British that the Americans were going to attack. How well do you know your trivia about Niagara Falls, or all falls in Ontario, the Niagara Region, for that matter? See if you can guess what our expert is about to ask, and see if you can get the right falls.
And join me, Jon Montgomery, for an amazing race through history. I remember the amplitude, as everybody does when you approach the falls. You can feel it in your bones, that thundering noise, the epicness of that volume of water coming over the Horseshoe Falls. And the question is, how many falls are the Niagara Falls made up of? That question again is, how many falls are the Niagara Falls made up of? The answers are possibilities 1, possibility number 2 is 2, possibility number 3 is 3, and I'm going to throw in a wild card. Possibility number 4 is 100. And the answer is option 3. There are 3 falls: the American Falls, the Bridal Falls, and the Horseshoe Falls. I got it wrong.
So this behind me is Decew Falls Generating Station. It's been in operation since the late 1800s. It's the oldest hydro plant in Ontario. It's certainly the oldest in the Ontario power generation fleet. It takes its water supply from the Walton Canal, and that water course has been well established for many, many years. The station behind me has 6 hydroelectric units, 4 of which are operational now. 2 have been mothballed. The water supply for those 2 units, when they were shut down, we've transferred over to our other Decew station, which is further behind me, which you can't see. So we have 4 operating units right now. They're each 5 megawatts. So the station is remotely controlled from our BEC 1 control room, which is our main control center for the entire Niagara region. So largely the station hasn't changed that much over the years. From a mechanical perspective, from a civil perspective, it's largely the same building. The changes over the years in terms of technology have been largely on the electrical and the control side. But in terms of the facility, it's largely operated and maintained like it was, for the last 50, 100 years. The colony, which used to be here, was actually just over there to our south, and that's where the folks lived who operated and maintained the station. Right now, all of our maintenance staff and control room staff report into other sites and come here remotely when there's a need to work on the machinery. But back in the day, there was a hydro colony here, and those are the folks who operate.
Decew Falls Generating Station here, or Toronto Power, or the Ontario Power Generating Station at the foot of the falls in Niagara Falls, or the Seratum BEC plants. They were protected during the war by the military. And it was the 19th and the, I believe it was the 44th Battalion that were two different battalions that were later amalgamated to form the Lincoln and Welland Regiment. And they patrolled these key plants and the Welland Canal to stave off any type of saboteurs that may happen to do any type of harm to these structures.
Beaver Dam's Creek is all natural from the mill dam downstream. From here back is all man-made and controlled by the region and by the hydro. The water here comes out of Lake Erie, through the Welland Canal, through a feeder canal to the reservoir across the street, and then down into here through the new spillway across the road. The waterfalls are natural. The upper Decew Falls is a 66-foot curtain falls. The lower Decew Falls is a 35-foot cascading falls. So the Morningstar Mill has been restored by volunteers for 27 years now. The mill is powered by a water turbine. Once a month we run the mill making flour on the grinding stones using the water turbine. When we open up the water inlet, water flows through the penstock into the turbine. 2,000 gallons a minute go through the turbine, producing 17 horsepower and turning the drive shaft at about 300 RPM. And by the time that transmits power through the gears and pulleys, the grinding stone turns at about 100 RPM. We feed the grain into the grinding stones, and it produces a mixture of flour and bran, which we separate on our separator in the basement into separate bran and flour piles.
So you're in the turbine shed at Morningstar Mill, and what makes our mill special is that all the equipment that you see here is original to about 1895, and the mill still runs with its original power source. So we call the mill Morningstar Mill because the last miller who ran the mill was Walton Morningstar, and he ran the mill from 1883 to 1933. But the mill was actually built in 1872, and when the mill was first built, it was run with a turbine, which was very new technology at the time.
This is our blacksmith shop, built around 1992, so it's not very old. The material inside dates from the 1850s to the 1920s, so you have both. This is just a means of showing folks how it was used and what it was used for here at the mill, because they made spare parts for the mill and they made extra pieces that we can use for decoration or for hinges. The work in here done would have been over by the 1900s, because the Industrial Revolution came along and put these guys out of business. For those of us who like blacksmithing, that's too bad. The blacksmithing is coming back, so we kind of like it. But it does represent the 1850s inside, just to show people what it was like to get through a day and how much work was involved just to keep the mill running.
So you're inside Wilson Morningstar's mill, and there's 3 different milling systems in the mill. Right behind me, these are roller mills for producing white flour. In the corner, we have 2 chopping mills to produce animal feed. And right beside me, we have a pair of millstones that we still use today to produce stone ground whole wheat flour. So you're inside the Morningstar's home, and as I mentioned outside, the house was built around 1895, but we're interpreting the house to 1932, and that is because Wilson and Emma, and you see them here, this is probably when they first purchased the property, and then you see them here again celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. So they're standing on the porch, and this is a letter that was given to the Morningstars congratulating them on their 50th wedding anniversary, and also thanking them for their friendship and their fellowship, which contributed to the social and industrial welfare of the community. So there was a little one-room schoolhouse that was just down the road. In the wintertime, Wilson would head over there early, start the fire so that the students could come into a warm classroom. Emma played the piano and organ for various school events, school concerts, church events as well, so they were respected in their community. You're in the Morningstar's kitchen, and when the house was built, Wilson put in a cistern which collected water from the roof, so rainwater, and that water was used for cleaning and washing, not for drinking. They still had to go out to a well to get their drinking water, but still to have access to water inside your house, best thing ever. So the Morningstars, they would pump the water up, they would use the water for their hot water reservoir here, and then you could transfer the hot water into your clothes washing machine for washing your laundry. So all that would be done in the kitchen. You'll also notice that we have a very large butter churn. So the Morningstars also had a barn with animals. They had chickens for meat and eggs. They had cows. Emma would be milking the cows. They could produce cream, and then from the cream they could produce butter and cheese. Emma also made sausage meat, as well as a lot of home preserve, and of course she did a lot of baking.
So folks, that is a wrap. Thank you for watching our show, checking out Falls and Decew Falls. Until next time, enjoy your history in Niagara, where we are bringing the history of Niagara to the world.